Welcome to another episode of the Bandage Podcast, a weekly wrap-up of the most trending healthcare news. Each week, join me and my co-host Alex Ross as we'll discuss the latest in healthcare, health IT, and compliance. In this week's episode, we discuss mold in hospitals, sickle cell disease treatment, early detection in ovarian cancer, and a mobile bus health center. Let's wrap things up. This is episode 8 for the week of November 25th. I'm Matt Moneypenny.
And I'm Alex Ross.
Before we get started, our diagnosis code of the week is W21, striking against or struck by sports equipment.
Now, let me tell you, Matt, this has actually happened to me.
Yeah?
I got to tell you a story. I'll try to keep it brief. Basically, during the time between high school and college, I thought I really wanted to be a hockey star. Okay.
Oh.
So I joined the minor league team. I was playing every night. And surprisingly enough, I actually escaped with pretty much no injuries from that entire season. The problem was I was terrible. And, someone tried to tell me I was terrible, one of my teammates. And, I didn't like that very much. So I took my hockey stick and I swung it at him, to which he grabbed it and struck me instead. So, lesson learned, don't swing hockey sticks at good hockey players.
See,
if you're a bad hockey player.
In hockey, you can strike against and be struck against.
Yeah, it definitely happened, but never enough that I needed that diagnosis.
Sports, folks. Gotta love them. Hate to love them. With that, let's get into the news. Going to the hospital to get healed or get sick from mold. 10 operating rooms at Seattle Children's Hospital will remain closed through January due to Aspergillus mold outbreak. The hospital says they will immediately install custom in-room filtration in these operating rooms and 2 equipment storage rooms. The installation was scheduled to be completed by July, but the hospital says it will now be complete by the end of January. It's not clear what caused the mold to resurface, but an investigation is underway. Aspergillus causes infections in people who are immune compromised, and currently only 1 child is confirmed sick with 1 other possible case. There are 3 operating rooms still functioning, so many surgical cases are being sent to other hospitals.
Good old Aspergillus niger. It's your classic black mold. When everyone freaks out about, there's mold in my house. They got black mold. It's deadly. Well, yeah, because it's very dangerous. Uh-huh. And I'm a little concerned how this even is occurring in a hospital setting. Mold needs some pretty specific circumstances to be growing.
Right.
Namely, higher humidity or like a wet surface. So what's going on? Are they leaking from somewhere? Would it be simple enough to install maybe a dehumidifier?
Right.
To dry out the room a little bit, bleach it down, and that's all you need to do? But I guess the filtration system, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because a filtration system isn't going to remove mold from the walls. Obviously, you're going to have to clean that in some way, and on the off chance that they don't do it well enough and the mold continues to grow, sure, a filtration system's going to cut back on the amount of spores that are around the room, but it's not going to kill the actual mold itself. So they really do need to eliminate the root cause here and dry out the room. I'm not sure how this happens, really. Yeah,
I think of all the places to have mold, a hospital is definitely the worst place to get any kind of mold growing within a room.
Yeah, and it's not just a normal hospital bedroom, I feel like a patient staying. These are surgical suites.
Yeah, and I feel like, they're supposed to be pretty cold, right? Usually hospitals are relatively cold in those areas because they have to be. So that's very strange how that happened, and hopefully they fix it.
Next up, from sickle cell to supercells. Doctors are reporting the first evidence of genetically edited supercells that could offer a safe way to treat sickle cell disease. Billions of cells were modified with the powerful gene editing technique called CRISPR, which stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats. These cells started working inside the body of the first sickle cell patient that received the experimental treatment. The edited cells produced a crucial protein at levels that have already exceeded what doctors thought would be needed to alleviate the excruciating, life-threatening complications of sickle cell disease.
This is really good news. Obviously, sickle cell is not something that should be taken lightly, and I think this is kind of a move in the right direction, especially with something like CRISPR, which has a lot of controversy surrounding it.
Right. It is interesting when you think about CRISPR. You're thinking of genetic engineering, genetic modifications, and really on like a scale of, I guess, related to improving the human condition or changing like fetal cells or something like that. And in this case, we're talking about very specific specialized cells that do a job that is very important and very necessary. And so that's pretty cool to hear that it's not all about these huge ethical dilemmas that genetic engineering could cause. There's some other small advancement. Well, I say small, but I don't mean small. This is pretty monumental in terms of what it opens the doors for. But small in terms of all of the different ways that we could possibly use this technology. It's nice to hear about these other stories, the other ways that it's also going to impact our medical community.
Yeah, I think eradicating genetic diseases such as something like sickle cell is very, very helpful.
And I do wonder if this kind of suggests that other kind of genetic or autoimmune type diseases are going to be tackled next by technology like CRISPR. Right. I know we talked about in a previous episode a different type of gene editing technology that's being developed. So working together between these different systems, I'm a little hopeful about the possibility that in the future, we're going to be able to eliminate a lot of these really terrible diseases.
Right. And I think if they continue to use CRISPR in this way outside of all the ethical issues that you just mentioned, then it will continue to flourish. But if they continue to pursue those unethical routes, then there might be a halt to it eventually. But hopefully they continue to stay on this helpful path.
Straight and narrow.
Yep.
I mean,
which is hard to do with something like CRISPR because you can the sky's the limit. Next up, a very good development to detect ovarian cancer. New artificial intelligence is helping oncologists detect ovarian cancer in patients much earlier than what was previously possible. The Phoenix Partnership, or TPP, has access to more than 50 million medical records of National Health Service patients in the UK. TPP used this data to build an AI program to focus on early detection of ovarian cancer. The technology can spot the cancer in more than 50% of cases up to 2 years before the doctor. By the time a woman learns that she has ovarian cancer, it's usually too late. But health technology advancement can help eliminate late detection. This is another great news headline to hear. Just another thing about technology and healthcare and how it's super helpful.
Obviously, the next step is going to be implementing these things, and I'm really hopeful at the prospect of AI being used to make our diagnoses faster and more accurate. I'm wondering how quickly this type of thing will be adopted. I could see it having some pushback from your everyday doctor who's like, "Oh, these are computers. What do they know? They've never met a patient before."
A decade of schooling on my back.
Right, and a decade of schooling is a great thing.
Yes.
We want our doctors to be well skilled, and I think the focus has to be, though, that this is another tool that can help our doctors continue to serve their patients in the most accurate and best way so that we can give them the proper treatments as quickly as soon as possible.
And I mentioned it before, AI is not meant to take people's jobs. It's only meant to enhance their jobs and make it easier for them. Right.
So if you're one of those people that's like, another one of these AI programs, you should embrace it at first, at least. You know, if we find out that it's not as accurate as it should be, then certainly more needs to be done. But based on what we've seen from the tests just out of the UK, it provides a pretty good platform that we're going to be able to build on that and continue to detect more diseases earlier. And I really like this approach to it. It seems like it learned from the histories of previous patients. Right. So with all of this health technology, health data, we talked about last week, I believe, with Google working with the hospital to kind of comb through and try to detect things within their patients' medical records. And while that has some kind of sinister implications about Google getting into healthcare, and it opens a whole box of different questions. But the main point is that using this technology has provided such a great benefit for us, and I'm excited to see where that goes. Right.
What's important to take away from this is that the technology can spot cancer in more than 50% of cases. Now, obviously, that's not entirely super accurate, especially from an AI perspective. A lot of times, there's a ton of testing that goes into these services, and 50% won't cut it. So they're going to continue to test this until it can come up to like almost 99 or 100% accuracy in its detection. So there's still a long way to go for this technology, but this is still great news.
I do wonder how many false positives it potentially identifies, because obviously if the doctor can't detect it at that point, this technology is detecting it 2 years before the doctor can detect it. What are the chances that there actually isn't a cancer there and it misdiagnosed it? And obviously, we don't want to start treatment if we can't confirm that it exists.
Next up, new mobile health services, and by that I mean a mobile bus. Madera County, California now has a new mobile health center available to schools in the Madera Unified School District. This bus is a wheelchair-accessible unit that resembles a fancy tour bus. Built using federal grant funds, the vehicle is fully equipped to be used for vaccination clinics, vision and auditory screenings, athletic physicals, counseling sessions, and more. It can be used by school nurses and clinicians, as well as community partners such as Camarena Health. Staff say they need the mobile center since many of the district schools don't have the space for health services on campus. Some are also in rural areas where families have a harder time traveling to care providers.
Thinking back to my days in, let's go with elementary school, middle school, we had what I guess you could call a school nurse, but the office wasn't like it wasn't a nurse's office that was being used for a nurse's office. It was an extra room that had been converted at some point.
Yeah.
And obviously, your school nurse isn't providing like doctor's level quality service, those kind of things. So having a community health service that can then kind of back up the services currently being offered by schools to provide kind of extra things like vision and auditory screenings. Yeah. I know that we had something like that when I was in school, but the way we did it was, in the spare hallway in the basement, which isn't, it's not a doctor's office. It was better than nothing for a lot of people. But I like the idea of having a shared place where schools in the area can kind of do these things in a more medical type setting.
Right. Yeah. A lot of times, as you mentioned, even from my perspective, the vision and auditory screenings were in random places throughout the building. And it's something that needs to be done every year by students. But also, as a former athlete in high school, I think the ability to give athletic physicals on campus of a school is extremely convenient, because a lot of times what people do is they schedule an appointment with their doctor. It has to be a few months beforehand, before the school year starts, before the sports season starts. And that can take a lot of time, and it's a pain in the butt. So this is definitely very helpful for that.
And also in some cases could be cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
And often the services provided at the school are provided free of charge or at very low cost. And so that's great for allowing more people to participate in things like school sports, which are pretty important for childhood development, being able to find that community and exercise and kind of get that movement. So I like that idea. I know the sports physicals my school provided, it was just like in the gymnasium with a little wheelie wall that they would wheel out. It's like, all right, your turn, step behind the wall. So, I like the idea of an outfitted bus, almost like a mobile doctor's office, really. Do you think that this is something that hospitals more generally might start to implement rather than just school specific, but maybe rural communities providing these to people who may have a harder time getting to the doctor's office?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. There's two really, really big trends going on in healthcare right now, and we already mentioned one, which was AI, and the second one is transporting healthcare somehow, some way, whether it be Uber Health, where they pick their patients up and drive them to the hospital themselves, or something like this where it's a mobile bus that actually gives care. And I think that this makes a lot of sense. Maybe instead of having all these rural communities drive 40, 30 an hour to their hospital, the hospital can set up an event where it's like, hey, on this day, we're going to be in this area, this local community. Stop by if you want a physical, if you want any kind of update to prescriptions, eye checks, hearing checks, anything like that. I think
vaccinations.
It's a huge, huge area right now in healthcare.
I'm imagining it sort of like a food truck.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Just gathering of food trucks, and then that one down on the end. You've got food trucks. You've got the mobile adoption unit from the local Humane Society, which is super cool, mind you. And then next to that, you've got the community health clinics bus, where they're providing things like flu shots or eye checks, ear checks, things like that.
It might not be as popular at a food truck convention where there's, street tacos and all those types of stuff, but still helpful nonetheless.
Well, if they're handing out maybe antacids, they'll be pretty
Yeah, right, exactly.
I could see it being a useful thing for like my local farmer's market. We get typically kind of an older crowd who's looking for kind of accessible, fresh local food.
Yeah.
And that might be a pretty good place for a local health center to not only advertise their services, but also maybe provide some of those services to the community.
With that, let's go to our next segment.
BREACH, Breach Patrol. It's a breach! All of the latest cybersecurity breaches.
Welcome to our segment Breach Patrol, where we talk about the latest cybersecurity breaches across the world. Alex, kick it off.
All right, first up, don't forget to pay your bill before you're breached. The city of College Station is warning utility customers about a potential data breach. The city was recently informed about a potential data security issue with Click2Gov, a third-party system used to process online payments. With help from independent investigators and federal law enforcement, the city immediately launched an investigation to determine the nature and scope of the security issue. While they respond to the issue, online payments have been disabled.
Well, it's good that they disabled online payments.
But what are the options now? You got to write a paper check?
Yeah,
Who
you got to write a
does that?
check? What the heck? This is 2019.
I actually do wonder how many people know how to write checks nowadays. I use them all the time.
Yeah,
and
I don't.
For people listening, I'm not that old, okay?
He sounds old, but he's younger than I am.
I'm not. I'm a millennial, okay? I use checks.
He likes to think so.
I use checks all the time, but I do wonder if that's kind of a thing of the past, because a lot of places don't even take checks anymore.
Yeah, right.
They don't take personal checks. They won't take cashier's checks. Really, the only thing it's useful for nowadays is sending a check to my dad for his birthday. No, I'm kidding. But online payments are pretty popular.
If the biggest target is healthcare, the second biggest target is cities, municipalities, things like that, because hackers realize, hey, I'm going to go for the healthcare company first because they have super secure data. If I can't go in there, then, I might as well reach out to the city and see if I can get some data about their citizens within that particular cohort.
Right.
So
I could see that being a bigger issue for like small cities who may not have the budget to do cybersecurity type stuff. But this was for the third party system that I presume is used by many, many cities. Mm-hmm. Maybe it is a smaller one that's used by smaller cities, and that's why it was targeted.
Smaller cities is a big target, but actually the city of Baltimore was hit with a huge ransomware attack that they're still recovering from to this day. So if you're a city governor, if you work in the city, if you work in any kind of government area, make sure that you're secure.
I feel like we make this conclusion almost every episode. It's like, there is security risks out there. You've got to take it seriously.
Yes.
So take it seriously.
And that's exactly what this segment is all about, right?
One day,
here are your examples.
My dream is that this segment will no longer exist because all the breaches will be gone. No one will be falling for them anymore. We'll be secure as heck. But take it seriously, y'all.
Don't let this breach rain on your Macy's Day parade. Macy's just confirmed that some customer data on its website may have been hacked during a week-long window in October. Very spooky. The retailer said that it is aware of the highly sophisticated and targeted data security incident related to Macy's.com that affected only a small number of customers, so they say. The company quickly engaged a leading forensic firm to remove the threat, and Macy's notified the affected customers. Macy's did not respond to specific questions about what type of customer information was compromised.
It seems like a pretty typical and standard reply from a company in regards to a data breach.
Especially a big one.
They will notify people individually, and they'll say, it only affected a small number of people. Mm-hmm. So we really don't know how big the breach was. It could have been everyone. Literally, It could have been everyone. And that's what their statement would say. Notify people individually. Don't worry, it was just a small one. Nothing too important was breached.
Do you think that that's the right way to respond, or do you think that these companies should be a little bit more transparent and be like, hey, this is the exact number of people who were breached. Here's an email blast about the entire information of this breach. And on top of that, we're going to send you an individual email saying whether or not you were compromised.
It's kind of a chance you got to take. Like, are you going to pretend that it wasn't a big deal, it was just a small number, and then hope that nobody catches on to that? Or are you going to just come clean and take the full force of it up front? Arguably, it'd be worse if people didn't know it was a big deal and then it turned out to be. But I think the chances of kind of flying under the radar by just saying, oh, don't worry, it was a little breach, are pretty good. And that's the way most companies tend to operate, I think.
Yeah, I believe, and I feel like breaches happen so often now that people are starting to become a little bit immune to them, unfortunately. So I think coming out straightforward and saying, hey, this is what happened. This is exactly how many accounts were affected. We're going to contact those individuals, and we're going to take necessary precautions in the future and
Right.
make sure that everyone is compensated for whatever happened.
Right. I could see this being a much bigger issue for like a publicly traded company, something like Macy's, who is, of course, responsible to their shareholders. So as a shareholder of Macy's, you might want to know those. I'm not, obviously, but if you are, you might want to know those very fine details, and you probably want to know them before it gets out to the public so you know whether or not you should dump all your stock.
Right.
But, in general, publicly traded companies have that accountability to their shareholders, and I think that is probably the best. And that's it for this week's wrap-up of your weekly healthcare news. I'm Alex Ross.
And I'm Matt Moneypenny.
And we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of The Bandage. This week's episode was written and produced by eTactics. eTactics is a leading revenue cycle solutions organization committed to providing innovative, web-based solutions that improve our clients' cash management and customer relationships. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
With that, let's go to our next segment.